My channel's name is an allusion to Matthew 18:22. It is also an allusion to Stoic tradition, but it is also an allusion to the Stoic Challenge 7 Sins deck in Yugioh, which is a terrible and cheesy strategy to use, but it's fun, and I like Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the idiosyncrasies of it, though, is the hand with which it censors. It kinda needs to, as it appeals to plenty of children. If horror movies got imported to the US, no sane company would market them in shiny, colorful containers beside the baseball cards, without drastically changing them or selling them elsewhere. I think it's generally the parents' duty to do the censoring, but in retrospect, I appreciate having a fun trading card game to play that my parents would allow me to play. This probably wouldn't have been the case with an uncensored Yu-Gi-Oh game. Word would have got out that a kid's card game has art of a witch burning, or a person's hand getting cut off, and I would be playing with marbles like some kind of rube. Thanks, libertarians. Either way, the way it censors is unbalanced. If there's a hint of cleavage or a firearm, it's gone. Whatever, I can live with that. Additionally, occult things are censored. That seems fine. However, card names are localized in a surprisingly subversive way. Sometimes localizations are basic translations, something kinda different, or ridiculous puns. Mythology is allowed to be alluded to in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can have Valkyries, Egyptian gods, anything deemed not real by consensus truth. But as Japan often does, it takes Jewish or Christian symbols and mythologizes, or if being uncharitable, fetishizes them. It's understandable given their history and geography. However, I expect a little better out of localization teams at Konami USA that, in theory, would have their ear from everyone to the 20-something neckbeard, to the father looking to buy a non-electronic game for their 7-year-old. So with that expectation in mind, if they would censor a pentagram on Dark Magician Girl, then why would they let dual terminal archetypes slide? Shaddolls, for instance. Shaddol in the lore is named for the Hebrew word Shaddai, meaning God. Additionally, the archetype contains the card Shaddol Shekinah, which alludes to Shekinah, meaning God's dwelling. They caught some other more egregious examples, though. Zephyrath was originally going to be called Zephyrgrammaton, a play on Tetragrammaton, and the Infernoids got named after various languages' numbers instead of demons, which would have been weird and gross if they actually released as straight translations from the Japanese. Of course, this isn't the case of needing to keep harmful content away from children. They're clearly not going to understand this naming convention one way or another. It's merely an issue of consistency. There was the implicit agreement that Yu-Gi-Oh cards would basically be free of allusion to relevant religions, but that trend was broken in 2014 for seemingly no reason, even though Konami has been shown to change the names of new cards from Japanese at the drop of a hat. While I'm thankful that they made attempts not to mock Abrahamic religions as mythology, I still wonder why they let Shaddol slide with that name. I feel like it represents a more broad phenomena. In December of 2000, a trans-Neptunian object was discovered, a possible dwarf planet in the Kuiper Belt. They named it Varuna, after the Hindu river deity. Nobody seemed to care, but when I heard about it, not in reference to anything in particular, it kinda bothered me. It's not any of my business to tell a Hindu what to be offended about, but I am concerned that one day I'll wake up and there's a new exoplanet named Theotokos or something. This was also 20 years ago, so I imagine there are worse examples. The two segments of Western life that seem to be the most hostile to Christianity also seem to have the privilege of being the namers of names, academia and pop culture. It can be pretty frustrating the way language is modified by the powers that be. There's nothing at all scary about the Yu-Gi-Oh example, but the really bad ones change Supreme Court rulings. In regard to the language I typically use conversationally, I'm agreeable but not nice, so I don't use my words very personally. Pronouns often, rarely names. I noticed that the extroverts, the smooth talkers, the leaders, take great advantage of the power of names. Controlling names is the most potent form of changing language, and changing language is the most potent form of changing people. The names are particularly potent because there's nothing before them that was there to refute the new definition. There was resistance to the changes in man, woman, and marriage because there was already a set meaning for them. But every time something new is discovered, How are we supposed to know that what we're calling is really appropriate and best represents the truth? As you can tell, we've already gone well beyond the scope of Yugioh. But it got me thinking about words describing themes. The Shadal archetype in Yugioh is all about corrupted versions of monsters already present in the continuity of the game. They have effects that activate on hitting the graveyard and focus on fusion. Even if you don't know anything about Yugioh, fusion, graveyard, and the idea of shadowy corruptions evoke certain connotations. As does Shadal Shikanaga, the boss monster sitting upon her throne. Do all these themes fit thematically with the naming Shadal? Does this look like Shekinah? Even grasping at straws, I don't see how the themes of Shadals fit anything in Abrahamic tradition. As for Shikanaga, at least it fits the theme of a dwelling place. However, I wish the naming was different. I've thought about how a Yu-Gi-Oh deck consistent with the story of salvation would work, but even that just seems unsuited for any game. My real concern, however, is the possibility I brought up before. Something entirely new named after something in Christian tradition. Named almost in complete ignorance of it. In the hands of the Japanese, I normally attribute it to ignorance of Christianity, or that strange way that any people treat the exotic. For example, at the most recent Amazonian Synod for the Catholic Church, Pachamama statues were present. Our ignorance of these things and obsession with other cultures put them there. At worst, it was idolatry. At best, it was treating the indigenous religion as a quaint joke. As we did to the tribal Amazonian religions, culture and academia think they can do to us. One day, a moon will be named Jesus. To worship Jesus would be idolatry. To do otherwise would be treating it as a quaint joke. And that's fine with the true idolaters. But they can't change the definition of the most powerful word. The most powerful word is the word.